I still remember the smell of that office cold espresso, recycled air, and ambition so thick you could choke on it. When I joined Hartwell Dynamics, I wasn't looking for glory. I just wanted stability, a place where my work meant something, where loyalty still mattered. Turns out, loyalty meant nothing in that building. I started as a mid-level analyst, the kind of role nobody notices unless something goes wrong. My job was to dig through reports, find inefficiencies, and propose fixes. Boring, but honest. Then Daniel Hartwell, the founder's son, noticed me. He had that kind of charisma that filled rooms, sharp suit, smooth talk, and a grin that made you believe he saw potential in you. "Alex," he said one night after I'd stayed late finishing projections, "you've got a rare thing. You don't just crunch numbers, you see patterns." I like that. I didn't realize then that was his way of recruiting people, not to his company, but to his side. From that night, everything changed. I was suddenly in meetings that were far above my pay grade. Daniel wanted my insight on upcoming acquisitions, my opinion on staff, even on internal politics. It felt flattering, intoxicating, even. He called me his guy, the one person he could trust when everyone else had agendas. I should have known that's what manipulators always say. The closer we got, the more I believed I was building something real, not just a career, but a partnership. When he invited me to join a side project, a small consulting branch under his management, I said yes before he finished the sentence. It felt like loyalty being rewarded. I threw myself into it. Late nights, weekends, missed family calls. I didn't care. The thrill of building something from scratch with Daniel felt like purpose. He'd often pat my shoulder and say, "You and me, Alex, we'll change this industry." I believed him. God, I believed every word. Then came Maya, the new head of marketing. Smart, elegant, confident in that way that makes everyone else feel like they're just pretending. Daniel introduced us like he was showing off a rare find. "Maya's going to take this brand to the next level," he said. "Alex, you'll be working closely with her." And we did. Too closely, maybe. She was sharp, sometimes cutting, but she saw things in me Daniel didn't. She didn't flatter, she challenged. She'd tear apart a presentation I worked on for hours and then sit beside me, helping fix every line until it gleamed. "You're good, Alex," she said once. "But you're loyal to a fault. Be careful who you bleed for." I laughed it off. I wish I hadn't. Over the next few months, our branch exploded with growth. New clients, record profits, industry recognition. Daniel called it our golden run. He started taking more credit publicly. I didn't mind at first. He was the face. I was the backbone. That's how things worked. Until one morning, I walked into a meeting that changed everything. A potential investor of Sterling Group had come to evaluate the branch for acquisition. Daniel presented our work, my reports, my data, my strategies. He didn't mention my name once. Every slide was branded Hartwell Innovation Initiative, like I'd never existed. I sat there in silence, heart pounding, waiting for him to nod to me, to acknowledge me, to do something. But he didn't. When Sterling's director congratulated him on his vision, Daniel smiled and said, "It's all about surrounding yourself with the right people." He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. That night, I stayed in the office long after everyone had left. My laptop still open on the last slide of his presentation, my work, my name erased. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I realized something small but devastating. I'd handed him everything. Every file, every insight, every late-night idea, all saved under the company server. All under his control. It wasn't just a stolen project. It was a stolen identity. I confronted him the next day. Not angrily, just a broken, "Daniel," I said, "why didn't you give me credit?" He smiled, the same charming grin that once inspired loyalty. "Alex, come on. You're overreacting. We're a team. My success is your success. That's how it works." I remember my voice trembling. "Except only one of us gets the recognition." His tone shifted to colder, clinical. "Look," he said, "you're great at what you do, but you're not a face people buy into. Investors want someone they can trust with vision, not spreadsheets. Be smart about this. Stay in your lane, and you'll be fine." That sentence, "stay in your lane," cut deeper than anything he'd said before. I left his office shaking, realizing that everything I'd built with him had been an illusion. I wasn't a partner. I was a disposable tool. And the worst part, I still wanted to believe he'd fix it, that he'd remember who helped him climb. But loyalty is a one-way mirror. It lets you see them clearly, while they only ever see their reflection. That was the moment something inside me cracked quietly, cleanly. I didn't plan revenge right away. That would come later. For now, I just knew one thing: Daniel Hartwell had stolen my work, my name, and my trust. And I was going to make sure he never stole from anyone again. People think revenge begins with rage. It doesn't. It begins with silence. After that meeting with Daniel, I stopped fighting him. I stopped asking questions. I stopped staying late. To everyone else, it probably looked like I'd accepted my place, the loyal workhorse finally learning obedience. But beneath that calm, something was shifting. I started watching him the way a scientist observes a specimen. His patterns, his temper, his weaknesses. The same skills that once made me valuable to him, the ability to see patterns where others saw chaos, now became my weapon. Daniel was predictable in his arrogance. He believed charm was armor. That if he smiled enough, nobody would notice the rot underneath. But I noticed. I always noticed. He loved two things more than money: control and reputation. So I started thinking, what happens when those two things start slipping through his fingers? The first step was information. If you want to destroy a man like Daniel, you don't hit him head on. You take his foundation piece by piece until the whole structure collapses on itself. I began copying internal reports, financials, contracts, project timelines. At first, it was just for protection. Evidence, in case he tried to pin something on me. But soon, I realized how fragile his empire actually was. The numbers didn't lie. Daniel's consulting branch wasn't a separate entity. It was a funnel. He'd been moving company resources into shell accounts, labeling them as R&D expenses. Classic corporate laundering, wrapped in buzzwords and polished presentations. The kicker: he used my analytics to justify every transfer. Every fraud marker was hidden behind data I had built. That realization burned like acid. He hadn't just stolen my work. He'd used me as cover for his crimes. That was when the anger returned, but this time, it was cold, controlled. I played my part perfectly. Smiled in meetings, nodded in agreement, even laughed at his stupid jokes. When he made another public appearance, taking full credit for our strategic breakthroughs, I was there, applauding from the crowd. He had no idea that every handshake, every casual conversation, everywhere in this together moment was being catalogued. Maya noticed the shift. She was too sharp not to. "You've gone quiet," she said one afternoon while reviewing a proposal. "Just focus," I replied. Her eyes lingered on me, searching, curious, maybe even worried. "You know he's using you," she said finally. I looked up. "What makes you think that?" She smirked faintly. "Because I've been in his orbit too long. Daniel doesn't have friends, only tools. And you were his sharpest one." That was the first time anyone had said it out loud. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I'm tired of watching good people break themselves for men who don't bleed." I studied her, trying to read her angle. Maya was brilliant, but I never knew which side she was on. "Are you warning me," I asked, "or recruiting me?" She smiled. "Maybe both." A week later, Daniel announced we'd landed another investor, Falcor Ventures. A big one. It was the deal that could make or break the branch. The office buzzed with energy. Everyone celebrated. But behind that excitement, I saw the pattern again: the same numbers, the same shell accounts. Only this time, the scale was much larger. He was laundering millions now. And guess whose name appeared in the system-generated approvals? Mine. That night, I stared at the screen for hours, the blue glow painting the room in cold light. He'd set me up. If anyone ever audited the data, I'd be the fall guy. The perfect scapegoat, the loyal analyst who handled the technical side. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was existential. I thought about quitting, about walking away before the trap closed. But then I remembered his words: "Stay in your lane." No, I thought, this is my lane now. And I'm not leaving it until he's in ruins. I spent the next month building my own secret file. Every email, every invoice, every false report. But not just on Daniel, on his network. The accountants who looked away. The investors who knew. Even Maya's name appeared in some threads. Though it wasn't clear how deep she was involved, it was like pulling a single thread from a suit and realizing the entire thing was held together by lies. Meanwhile, Daniel got bolder. He started traveling more, hosting lavish investor dinners, leaking exclusive insights to the press. He was everywhere, shining and touchable, but I could see the cracks forming. Small things, a nervous glance when finance mentioned compliance, a quick subject change when I brought up audits. He was confident, but not careful. I waited. Patience became my weapon. Then one night, Maya called me. "I know what you're doing," she said. Her voice was steady, not accusing, almost impressed. "What do you think I'm doing?" I asked. "Collecting, preparing." She paused. "You're not the only one." My breath caught. Meaning Daniel's burned more than one bridge. Some of us are tired of watching him destroy careers while he plays the genius. Her tone was colder now, deliberate. "You want him gone. I can help." I didn't answer right away. I didn't trust her, but I couldn't ignore her either. If she really had leverage, maybe together we could bring him down faster. Finally, I said, "If we do this, we do it right. No chaos, no mistakes." She laughed softly. "You sound like him. Then maybe it's time he meets his reflection." From that night, everything changed. Maya and I became a silent alliance, invisible to everyone else. She had access to the PR channels and investor communication. I had the data. Together, we could expose Daniel completely. But exposure wasn't enough for me. I didn't just want people to see what he'd done. I wanted them to feel what he made me feel: powerless, humiliated, erased. So instead of simply leaking the truth, I decided to build the illusion first. The illusion that Daniel's empire was thriving, bigger, stronger, unstoppable. Because the higher he climbed, the harder the fall. I crafted perfect numbers, projections so enticing that even the board couldn't resist. Investors poured in more money. Media coverage exploded. Hartwell Dynamics became the next big success story. And Daniel, he was drunk on the illusion I created. At one gala event, he clinked his glass against mine and said, "You see, Alex, I told you we'd make history." I smiled. "We will," I said. "Just not the kind you're thinking of." That night, when I went home, I looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't see the quiet, loyal man Daniel had underestimated. I saw something else, someone sharper, colder, dangerous. And I realized the cruel irony. To destroy a man like Daniel Hartwell, I had to become a little like him. There's an art to making a man fall for his own reflection. Once Maya and I agreed to move, we stopped pretending. We set up meetings that looked like coincidence and timed conversations so Daniel would overhear. Half-truths. We fed him praise until it swelled into arrogance, and then nudged the world to applaud louder. He needed an audience. We learned how to make one brutal enough to break him. Our first deliberate move was public and petty, a branded event that read like a victory lap. Maya designed it to glitter. I supplied the numbers, revenue curves, projected margins, beautiful lies wrapped in spreadsheet skin. I watched Daniel practice his smile in the bathroom mirror for 10 minutes like a televangelist. He walked into the room glowing, hair perfect, cufflinks shining. And the whole agency exhaled for him. During the Q&A, I asked the one question he couldn't spin away. It was mundane, a probe dressed as curiosity. "How do you reconcile the rapid vendor onboarding last quarter with our compliance standards?" I asked, voice soft, eyes steady. He laughed. It was the laugh of a man who believed he could charm any problem away. "We're agile," he said. "Speed wins in this market." That laughter became our first tiny fracture. Journalists wrote about his bravado. Investors quoted him in post-event roundups. We'd set a trap dressed as triumph. He'd walked through it smiling. From there we turned to the inner engine that kept Hartwell's story spinning. The people who believed in him because they wanted to believe in something bigger than themselves. You can't push a man down without touching the hands that hold him up. So we touched them. Maya worked the PR machine. She cultivated op-eds from industry voices that praised Daniel's risk appetite while casually noting the industry's new appetite for transparency. She whispered about independent audits and third-party validators. Her implication was carefully neutral. "There's nothing to hide, but we must be thorough." I worked the data side. I engineered small discrepancies, a mislabeled invoice here, A stray approval there, the kind of clerical ghosts that haunt a CFO's nightmares. I never forged signatures or fabricated contracts. I simply nudged existing threads into a loom that would show pattern when the auditors peered in. Patterns are the language corruption speaks. Auditors know how to read it. The first public wobble happened on a Thursday. An influential trade reporter published a piece that read curious, not accusatory. A rising star's rapid rise, and the questions it leaves. It quoted an anonymous source about creative accounting for scaling. The piece didn't accuse. It implied. But implication is a tide that erodes. Daniel called an emergency all hands that evening. He tried to be the calming center, but the center was shaking. Voices in the room were different now. Less adulation, more calculation. People asked about contingency plans. Investors called. The board asked for a status memo. He paced in front of glass walls, asked for trust, and got something slighter, a polite nod and a guarded look. That's when the paranoia set in. He started reading emails twice. He asked the finance lead for every backup file. He began to micromanage in the way jealous men micromanage lovers, overcompensating, suffocating, exposing the seams of his own leadership. Maya fed the fire subtly. She leaked small victories. Client renewals, press mentions to keep his ego inflated. But between those feedings, she found time to plant seeds of doubt among investors, a quiet message about the vendor's offshore structure. I called to a single procurement officer, a major client questioning due diligence. Those seeds sprouted into today's anxieties and tomorrow's demands. We leaned on people who have been used without credit. Tomas, the junior creative who'd been edited out of 3 major campaigns, suddenly found our emails friendlier. Mar, who'd held midnight calls and never gotten a single public acknowledgement, was offered an anonymous inbox where she could dump evidence with zero fear of repercussion. The trick was to give them agency without asking for it, a channel, a voice, a place to be seen. People with nothing to lose say things loudly. And then we set the stage for the humiliation he couldn't control. We created a Fox celebrity endorsement campaign that required fast vendor onboarding and expedited contracts. Daniel loved it, the optics, the headlines, the idea of being seen as the men who could make the brand into a phenomenon overnight. He pushed back on caution because impatience, for him, had always been a virtue. We contracted the vendor, the one I'd quietly vetted for sloppiness weeks earlier, through a shadow routing that made it a nightmare for anyone trying to trace funds quickly. The vendor began to miss deliverables in small, infuriating increments. A teaser video languished, then surfaced with rough edits. Analytics dashboards lagged. The client called. Daniel called meetings. He demanded explanations he hadn't asked for when the work was promised. He looked flustered under the lights. I remember watching him that week. Hands white on the conference table, voice strained. The man who once spoke in headlines now found his timing off. The same audiences who'd cheered him were asking for proof. The pressure did something worse than make him flustered. It made him reactive. He started making quick, public decisions to cut blame rather than cut losses. He apologized on social channels in trademark tones, remorseful but not accountable, and suggested internal restructuring that, on paper, looked decisive but in practice shuffled names to hide responsibility. He called the audit a learning moment and insisted on transparency while quietly throttling access to core files. People noticed the dissonance. Investors smelled risk. A few quietly withdrew commitments. The board called an informal review that was formal enough to make the legal team nervous. He insisted he had control, but control is illusion when trust evaporates. Then the unintentional betrayal happened. One of his closest allies, a senior manager who'd drunk his Kool-Aid for years, kept a copy of a vendor contract on his laptop for convenience. He left it on a cafe table after a late-night work session. A stranger took a photo. Those photos hit a private Slack channel I'd created for people who wanted to expose small injustices. Within hours, the photo, a blurry image of a contract header and an offshore address, was in the hands of the investigative reporter. The story that followed didn't scream fraud. It whispered mismanagement. But in the court of public opinion, whispers can topple reputations. The headline read, "Questions around fast vendor approvals at Hartwell's consulting arm." The article linked the vendor's address to several shell entities the reporter had dug up. It quoted anonymous former staffers about pressure to accelerate and included a line from Mara's anonymous submission. We were told to make it look perfect. Daniel issued a statement the next morning, the kind PR teams had crafted. For crisis fatigue, regret, commitment to process, a promise of full cooperation. But in interviews, he sounded defensive. In investor calls, he grew short. The man who'd once filled rooms with confidence now filled silence with excuses. That was the day the board asked for a forensic audit. A forensic audit is not a dramatic thunderclap. It's a mathematician's hand under your ribcage. It counts everything you thought was private and makes it public. The auditors asked for logs, approvals, emails. They requested vendor histories and bank trails. They subpoenaed bank statements. People who had relied on gloss and bravado suddenly had to produce receipts. Daniel's panic was a private thing. He flicked between calls like a man trying to plug holes in a sinking ship with postcards. He called me at 2 a.m, voice then, asking about an approval timestamp. His tone wasn't the familiar charm, it was pleading. "Alex," he said, "can you pull the file? I need to understand what happened." I sat on my couch and stared at the phone. For a moment, the old me, the man who wanted to belong, wanted to help. But the old me had been used as a shield while someone else built a persona on my labor. I chose the new me. "I'll give it to legal," I lied. "They'll coordinate." He sighed, the sound of a man who'd finally realized his scripts had been rewritten without his knowledge. "Please," he said. "Please be careful." Careful? He asked me to be careful, as if I'd ever been the reckless one. The audit began to unspool what we'd stitched. It found vendor routing that didn't match invoices, approvals that bore my credentials but came from machines that logged different IPs, and a pattern of expense reclassification that favored certain partners. The auditors flagged anomalies and copied the board. The board, who'd once toasted his vision, now read emails with a new kind of attention: legal, fiduciary, cold. Daniel lashed out publicly, calling the leak a smear campaign, hinting at sabotage. He accused unnamed rivals. He demanded loyalty. He tried to brand the whole thing as an attack on Hartwell's culture. But his defenses were defensive in the wrong way. They sounded like the excuses of a man who had convinced himself his performance equaled truth. The more he raged, the less he controlled the narrative. Legal teams smelled exposure, investors smelled risk and moved their capital to safe accounts. His inner circle thinned as people started to whisper about reputational risk over cocktails. The applause that once buoyed him turned sideways into murmurs. Meanwhile, Maya and I kept our faces neutral. We walked through the office like mourners who'd staged the funeral. People who had been loyal to Daniel now found something to say in private: confessions of late nights, of compromised principles, of being ordered to prioritize optics over accountability. Tomas dropped a stack of draft files in my inbox that proved credit had been reassigned. Mara forwarded time cards that contradicted public statements. The dossier grew. There were nights I lay awake thinking about what I'd become. Revenge isn't a neat moral ledger. It's a slow series of transactions that leave you with a balance sheet of things you can't easily explain to your mother. I told myself the ends justified the means, exposing corruption, protecting careers, making a monster accountable. But at 3 a.m., when the city hummed and my chest felt empty, the line between justice and vengeance blurred like rain on glass. The pressure on Daniel became a public performance of fragility. He gave interviews that sounded rehearsed. He blinked faster on camera. Once, in a hallway, he tried to corner me, voice low and frantic. "Alex," he said, eyes searching, "what do you know?" There was a small, pleading boy in there beneath the veneer. For a heartbeat I wanted to pull him close and tell him to stop. Instead, I leaned back and watched him unpack himself slowly, like a person surrendering without realizing it. "I know enough," I said. "I know you built a house on someone else's mortgage." He laughed, a brittle sound. "You'd do anything for a grudge, wouldn't you?" Maybe I would. Maybe I already had. Then came the night the board froze his accounts. Not everything, not yet, but enough to make payroll a problem and to make his swagger feel stranded. He walked into the office the next morning like a man whose shoes no longer fit. He stared at faces that had once hung on his every word and saw only calculation, distance. The thing that had fed him attention was the now, and attention is the food the charismatic consume. The fall was slow. as planned, but its sound was a low howl you could feel in your ribs. It wasn't a single victory. It was a long, grinding exposure that left nothing pretty. He called me one final time, that weak voice ragged, not with threats but with something I recognized and hated, real fear. "Please," he said, "help me put this back together." "How?" I asked. "By lying more convincingly." Silence, then a whisper, "I can make it right." But the ledger had teeth now. People had names and dates and emails. They had time-stamped drafts and vendor wires. The truth, when it is structured with evidence, does not bend to charm. When the board called an emergency meeting and asked for his resignation, Daniel initially refused. He insisted on fighting, on clearing his name. But men built on performance cannot endure the slow burn of documented inconsistency. They need drama, not process. He needed cameras and speeches and applause. The board wanted a different kind of drama, of accountability, quiet, legal closure. He had neither the stomach nor the files for that fight. On the day he stepped down, he walked past my desk without a word. His face was empty of the grin I'd once trusted. The agency watched him go with a complicated appetite, relief, schadenfreude, and a touch of grief. People lost jobs in the months that followed. The ripple effect of exposing something rotten is always larger than your original intention. I waited a long time afterward to feel something like triumph. Instead, I felt a hollow that had the shape of a question. Had I saved more than I'd ruined? Had the people I wanted to protect been spared, or merely pushed into another kind of precariousness? For months, those questions sat in my gut like small stones. Maya came by my desk that afternoon and left a folded note. "We did it." No exclamation. No gloating. Just a line that read like a gravestone. I folded it into my pocket and walked to the window, watching the city unfold in indifferent motion. We'd pushed Daniel to his limits, and he'd tripped over his own appetite for applause. He'd fallen on the stage he'd built. The house of mirrors had cracked, but the shards cut everyone who touched them, us included. And as the dust settled, I understood a new, dangerous truth. Breaking a man built on lies is often the only way to get to the truth. But the act of breaking leaves you changed. You learn how to make the world tilt. You learn how to shape outcomes. That knowledge is useful, and it is corrupting. We had one. The question that kept me awake then and keeps me awake now was what to do with the weapon we had forged in the name of justice. It's strange how quiet victory sounds when you finally get it. Daniel's downfall wasn't an explosion, it was an implosion. No headline screamed "CEO exposed." No viral video. Just a soft collapse of confidence. One board meeting, one leaked email, one frozen account at a time. When he finally resigned, the office didn't cheer. It exhaled. People whispered, avoided eye contact, shuffled papers they didn't need to. For years, his name had meant momentum. Hartwell knows people. Hartwell makes deals. Now it was something you said in past tense. I should have felt vindicated. I thought I would. For months I'd lived with fire under my ribs, feeding it, shaping it, watching it burn the man who'd burned me. But when it was over, when his office door closed for the last time and his nameplate came off, I didn't feel triumph. I felt weightless and empty. 2 weeks later, I saw him again. He called me from a blocked number and asked for 10 minutes. "Just 10, Alex," he said. His voice was different, softer, hoarse, like it had been scraped clean. Against every better instinct, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop near the river. He was there before me, alone. No suit this time, just a hoodie and eyes that had aged 10 years in 10 days. He smiled when he saw me, a small, broken thing. "Do you ever think about how it started?" he asked. I didn't answer. He kept talking. "I didn't mean to destroy you. I got caught up. It all moved too fast. And you were always good at what I wasn't." His hand trembled as he stirred his coffee. "I needed to stay ahead. That's all I ever wanted. You stole everything I built," I said quietly. "I sold it," he corrected. "And you helped me do it. You were the reason it worked." He looked up, tears sitting just behind his smirk. "That's the part you never understood. You were my best weapon." For a moment, I wanted to hit him. Not for the insult, but for the truth. Because he was right. I'd spent years teaching him how I think, how I sell, how I plan. Every lie he told had been crafted with the tools I'd handed him. He leaned back. "You win, Alex. You always wanted to be the hero, right?" congratulations. He stood to leave. I didn't stop him, but as he walked out the door, something in me cracked, not pity. Not satisfaction. Something colder. Something final. The investigation dragged on for months. The audit report went public. Words like misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, and ethical violations painted his legacy in gray. His reputation was ashes. The company survived, barely, but the name Hartwell was gone from the door. Maya and I stayed. We led the rebuild quietly. Investors returned in trickles, clients tested the waters again, and the air in the office grew lighter. People called us the survivors. Some called me the man who took him down. I stopped correcting them. But nights were harder. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that coffee cup trembling in Daniel's hand, the way his voice cracked when he said, "You were my best weapon." Was I? Had I simply traded one mask for another, his arrogance for my vengeance? Revenge has a flavor, metallic, sharp, and sweet for the first few seconds. But once you swallow, it burns. Months passed. Then, one morning, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single photograph of Daniel, standing in front of a small bookstore by the coast, smiling. On the back, in his handwriting, "You taught me how to rebuild. I hope you learn it too." No apology, no threat, just closure, maybe. I sat for hours with that photo in my hand, thinking about what came after revenge, or what's left when the person you hate is gone, and the only thing left to face is yourself. The next day, I took it to the river, the same one where we'd met for coffee, and let the photo slip from my fingers into the water. It drifted, spun once, then sank. The current took it. And for the first time in years, I felt free.